Welcome, everyone, to Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'm your host, Christine Courtney. Our goal here is to give you some actionable takeaways that will help you lead your teams. Thanks for joining us on this leadership journey. Let's get started. Hey, everybody. Welcome. I'm super excited to have my pal and someone who I trust very much in my life with me today. And that is Mr. Gregory Shamie is back in the studio. Welcome, Greg.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Christine. How's it going?
Good. I'm thrilled to have you today because it's a beautiful day here in New York where we're filming, and we're talking about a really important topic, maybe the most important when you get right down to it, in terms of communication, in terms of building relationships, both in your personal life and at work. And we're talking about trust. How do you build trust? How do you rely on that trust to build the foundation for all your relationships? And certainly on this podcast, we talk mostly about how we can improve as leaders, right? But also we often touch on how we improve as a person, because if you are constantly working on yourself as a person, you are becoming a better leader. And trust is probably one of the most important things. When we start, I think almost any engagement with a company, we try to start, if we have a choice, we start with this topic of why is trust so important? How can you work on what we're going to be talking about as our trust quotient, so to speak, kind of like your EQ, it's your trust quotient that you have and your intelligence around trust, how you can improve it, because some people think you have it or you don't, but we actually think you can improve it on all sides. And then also it really is important to any part of your life. And so really, if you practice building trust at home, if you practice building trust in your relationships with friends, you're going to get better at building it at work, right? It's everything helps everything, and vice versa. If you work on it at work, it's going to help it's going to bleed over in your personal life.
Absolutely. The line is extremely thin, as we say in our work. And so, yes, we're stepping over onto each side as we play the game for sure. And trust it's fascinating to me because it's epic learning, continuous epic learning for me, even though I'm teaching it. I just did a workshop on this for a group this week, and it's absolutely a fascinating topic. And it's kind of like the concept of leadership. It's so big sometimes that you can't get down to the specifics, right? Of how do you actually make and build and plant seeds to grow this thing called trust. The first thing that comes to mind, though, is this thing that when I was listening to you, we as humans, the first thing we do is we assess, do we trust this person or do we not trust this person? Like right away, our brains are starting to like try and figure out, and it's connected to the psychological safety piece we did, right? But it's all about like, am I going to trust this person or am I not going to trust this person? And what is it about those initial thoughts that I find very intriguing as well?
Yeah, really intriguing, right? Stephen Covey did a lot of work on trust. And he said, if you ever read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People or did any of work on that, one of his quotes on that is, trust is the glue of life. It's the most essential ingredient in communication. It's the foundational principle that holds all relationships. And I love that because it's so true. Just like you said, we're constantly looking at, since we were a young kid, and trust maybe was first broken in whatever ways it was for us, right? As we grow up and you start to go, oh, wait, I can't trust that friend, or I can trust this person or whatever. You start to assess people that way. And then Stephen Covey's son, who did has done most of his life's work around this area of trust, which is in his book, The Speed of Trust. He also wrote one, I think, called Trust and Inspire, that's new. And he says that trust is the one thing that changes everything. I love that. Trust is the one thing that changes everything. And my discerning mind keeps trying to debate that in my head and try to be like, no, it's really love, or it's really this, or what is that? But I think that's a pretty good premise for us to start with today. Certainly, just for those of you who are data people out there, there's been a lot of people that have been trying to also assess and put numbers to this very intangible idea of trust. And ADP research did some and said team members who trusted their team leader were 12 times more likely to be fully engaged at work.
Right.
That's a huge number. 12 times, right?
Yeah.
Harvard Business Review did a study. They said if you in teams that were really had high trust work environments, there was 74% less stress, 106% more energy. That's a crazy amount of energy.
Yeah.
At work, 50% higher productivity, 13% fewer sick days, 76% more engagement, 29% more satisfaction with their lives, much less just work, and 40% less burnout. So that is a really strong case for focusing on how do you build trust within your organization? How do you just start with your team? And if you don't even have a team, how do I start with one relationship, one partnership? How do I start to build trust more and more? And how do I become a very trustworthy person and therefore then a very trustworthy leader?
I love the data on it because, looking at that leadership position, if you're a people leader and you have direct reports, that's something that I'm always looking at, I'm coaching on, I'm talking about, I'm teaching, I'm working on it myself. How am I building that trust quotient with each of my direct reports? And that, when you say quotient, I think equation, and that really gives me an idea. Maybe we can break what that equation looks like down and really start to look at, okay, so what can we do to build trust? I mean, it's such a fascinating topic. It really is.
Yeah. And, Stephen Covey, when he did The Speed of Trust, what I love about that is he really looked at, when you have a lot of trust, and think about it for yourself, like in relationship, whether it's with a vendor, whether it's with a client, whether it's with a spouse, whatever it is, when you have that, the speed of how things get done happens really much faster and the cost goes down. Speed goes up, cost goes down. And then it can be the opposite when you have a low trust situation with someone, right? Think about it. Everything takes longer. People aren't sure. Everybody's covering their butt along the way.
And
so
costs
think of bureaucracy.
go way up too. Right.
Costs go way up.
Right.
Oh my God, the amount of time I'm taking on this, whatever. And so really it behooves you to really look at this. We're going to talk equations. So when we're talking about equations, Greg, what's the equation that you use all the time?
Well, for me, it's those two key elements that create this equation, and it's competence and character. And if you look at those two buckets, my competency, my capabilities, and then my character, those are the two elements. If I add those two together, then, there's that Venn diagram piece in the middle where you're really building credibility and, through your competencies and through your character.
Yeah. Credibility.
Yeah. Credibility. I think that's what it is. Like, trust is credibility. When I think of people in my life that I trust and we do these activities with our team members, and, when we start to reflect back, who has these behaviors and these traits of these high trust individuals in our lives? It could have been from a teacher to a coach that we had in a sports team to, a parent or somebody in our family, somebody that really has these high trust behaviors and qualities, and breaking that down and then comparing it to the leaders in our lives who we had low trust with. And what that T-chart looks like. I love that because it really does show me a map of how what I want to work towards in terms of this phrase, which I love, who will I walk through walls for? And who will walk through walls for me? And then when you ask that question, really looking at, why would I walk through a wall for Christine Courtney? What has she done for me as my leader, right? And why would I do whatever it takes, whatever you're asking me to do for you, because I feel like you have been there for me. You have my back. You're always working on my behalf. You care about what's blocking me, what's weighing me down, right? And so you've been making all these deposits in me, and now I am going to do whatever it takes for you.
Right. Well, thanks, Greg. That's nice. I didn't expect that, but that's nice. Yeah, thanks. And it's so true. Like that idea of we can all think about leaders or people that we've worked for or people in our lives that we feel that passionately about and what they did for us, why we knew we trusted them. And who was that for you? And then also I think sometimes it's really easy to know trust by sometimes thinking about the negative, like somebody that you didn't trust. Did you ever have anyone like that, Greg? You don't have to say, please don't say the person's name.
Oh my
gosh. But is there somebody
yes.
in your whole life where it's so clear what the lack of trust or the broken trust created?
I mean, it's so interesting because I can flash back to being a 10-year-old on the stairs of my home and, hearing people coming into our house. And, I've been so fortunate to have such an incredible family. But in this moment, I remember I wasn't told that my grandfather had passed away. And so I'm overhearing all these people coming into my house, but I have no clue what's going on. So there was no communication, no sharing of information with me, the 10-year-old. Out of intention was good. It was protect your child, right? The old school, protect your child from anything sad or, that could be hurtful is, I guess, what my, parents were thinking. But I felt betrayed in that moment because I wanted to know what happened and I had to figure it out in really unclear ways, right? So that really impacted me. And then I'm going to give you 3 examples. That's one from the personal, another from a team experience where I was on a baseball team and I had been recruited by this coach and I'd been told all these incredible things if I was going to go and play for him, that we would go to California on this all-star team, that we would, play in this high-level league, all these promises that made me go, oh, you know what? Maybe I should go play for this coach. And it ended up all being lies. And it ended up being like 3-4 steps backwards for me because I trusted this individual and was completely betrayed in that moment. And so that was like, oh my God, that was a terrible feeling. And so I had to figure out how to overcome that. And then in the workplace, having a supervisor who, it was their way or the highway. There was no openness to ideas. There was no listening to my thoughts or my voice. Like, these are all examples where my trust was low because of how I had been treated in those situations.
Interesting. Thank you, Greg, for sharing that, because I had not heard that first story that you shared. And that was, I think, quite vulnerable of you to share that with me. And what's interesting is by sharing that, even in that way, I could feel trust, another like little penny in your trust bank in my heart that you just added, which you didn't need to, but it did. And so I appreciate you sharing that. And that's one of those things I think that we can do in that idea of character and like how we show up. And if you're willing to be vulnerable or share some of that, certainly not only with me, but with people that are listening to us. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm fascinated by this powerhouse of a word, vulnerability, and actually stepping into vulnerability first versus most people think, including myself, that we need to build trust first before I can be vulnerable. But like you just highlighted, I took a step out of my comfort zone and was vulnerable and shared something, and that built trust for you. So there's something for leaders in that, I think, for sure. Like, how are you as a leader stepping into vulnerability first and allowing that to be the earth for you to plant the seeds to build the trust?
Right. It's like a chicken or the egg conversation. We'll often have people say to us, there's always at least one, sometimes and oftentimes many more people in a room that will say, people have to earn my trust. I mean, think about it for yourself out there. How do you say that? Have you said that to yourself? And the problem with being the leader that says that is that you are then not extending trust first. So it doesn't mean that if somebody repeatedly breaks your trust, that you have to be a complete idiot and blindly trust them again, right? Not at all. But if they haven't given you a reason not to trust them, that maybe it is important to step into that abyss. Like you said, put yourself out there. We call this podcast Stepping Into Your Leadership on Purpose, because there is a risk associated with stepping into something, stepping into leadership. And sometimes that means willing to get hurt. And know that you can come back from this, because it's not about protecting yourself from ever getting hurt, injured, disappointed. That oftentimes is the thing that holds you back from your greatness. And so, like, how do you step in knowing that what you really have is resilience? So not resistance to everything, but resilience to come back, to get back up, to come back from somebody, maybe not coming through on a promise, not coming through on deadlines that you give them, and then being able to go, well, wait a minute, where's my character in this? Where's my competence as a leader? How can I hold them accountable? Trust doesn't just happen. We think that it should just happen. And if we're lucky, we have people in our lives that it happens instantly and we can keep that. But oftentimes that's not the case, right? It's a product of purposeful action, focus, attention, behavior. And I think what I've learned in just our study of this and doing this for, hundreds of times now for groups, is that it forces me to go, wait a minute, let me get a check on this. How can I get better at this? Where have I let people down? And I feel like I often, I think maybe it's just maybe it's because I'm older, I'm able to often own, yeah, I've let people down in this. And it can be in those areas of character or those areas of competence that you said. So what I love about it, and this comes from Stephen Covey's work in Speed of Trust, but I love that he breaks down credibility, because oftentimes we'll have, especially young people, say, oh, I need to build up my credibility in the office, right? Or my gravitas, or whatever these kind of words are that you don't know what to do with. You can actually break it down into like, okay, it's character and competence. And how can I increase my areas of character? Because aren't I born with that? Didn't I learn that by third grade? And the answer is no, you can actually, hopefully you are getting stronger and stronger in your character, who you are, how do you live, what are your internal values, that you're constantly assessing those. And then that other idea that you brought up, Greg, which I love, which is competence. And sometimes it's just easier to focus on increasing competence. At least I think so. What are your thoughts on that?
I think competence is the way you can really have an impact. For example, simple example, if you as a leader, as a manager of direct reports, you say to one of your direct reports, you know what, I'm going to take that off your plate, right? Because one of my goals as a leader is to hear what's happening, what's weighing down my direct reports, and then to help lighten their backpack so that they can, again, be motivated by that and then start to thrive again. A lot of times that burnout happens because they're just overweighted with too many things. So taking that one thing off their plate, clearing their path a little bit, and then seeing how that impacts them. And that's like an action I can take to show competence to them. Like if I say something and then I actually do it and I follow up with it and I get it done for them, that is going to, and I'm speaking from experience because I actually have a supervisor who does that for me, and it motivates everything out of me. Like when she takes something off my path that's weighing me down, just one thing, I still have 50 other things. Suddenly I'm like, thank you so much. And she has deposited competence because she's followed through on everything she said, and she's uplifted me to continue moving forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I think, when you say that, I think you have to know, that's where knowing your people is really helpful, and knowing where they are and what they're struggling with at the moment, because sometimes building trust might be giving them more. Like sometimes it might be helping them by taking something away, and sometimes building trust might be giving them more, saying, I am giving you this project. I'm giving you this thing that I love, and I'm going to pass this over to you because I trust that you can do this, that you're ready for this, that you can build this muscle now. But you really have to know where they are, right, at that point, and watch and observe.
100%. Every single individual is a different equation. And it's my job as a people leader to figure out what that equation is and what works for them. What is their preferences? How am I going to communicate, share information, hear their problems in a way that is going to help them strive for more and feel good about it, right? Again, because if I'm feeling good and I'm engaged, I'm going to produce. Those are the key things. If I'm feeling good and I'm engaged, I'm going to produce, which is a win-win for everybody.
Yeah. And I think let's jump into some tips for building this, right? Because I think everybody knows how important trust is. And I think you demonstrated one thing, that if you want to build trust, first extend trust, but also maybe start with something vulnerable. Start a meeting. If you know your folks are struggling with something, start with yourself sharing something kind of vulnerable that opens up that space to them, right? That they can be free, that you can build psychological safety. But what are some other tips, let's say for increasing kind of competence? What's one thing that people can work on to increase their competence so that therefore that trust quotient in your mathematical equation goes up there?
I'm always thinking about this idea of transparency. I think transparency is absolutely key. How am I sharing information openly and candidly? Am I providing regular feedback? Am I asking for feedback for me? Is this working for you? What could I do differently? Am I modeling, open, clear communication? That's something I'm always working on, because again, I may think it's clear, but it doesn't matter. It depends on what's being received, right? That's the most important thing. So transparency for me is number one.
I just want to play therapist for a minute. But I think back to that 10-year-old Greg now that you just told us that story where you had no transparency from your parents at that time about your was it your
Yeah.
grandfather,
Yeah,
your
grandpa.
grandmother? Yeah, of the death. And so, of course, like that transparency, lack of transparency really cut deep in that moment and it left a mark, right? So now it's going to reverberate anytime there's a feeling of being in the dark about something. And I think that's what's so powerful for me to listen to you, because I know transparency is big for you. And now I also kind of have a sense of kind of the depth of it and why it's so important. But this is just one person. You have all these people that you work with and everybody has their own stories, right? And has not just one, but tons. So that's why working on these trust things are so important, because you don't know where you're mirroring something else that's hurt them or harmed them in their lives.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. As I call it, the warehouse of experiences that we all have, right? And they're not all good.
Yeah. One other tip you can do for building competence that I think is a rather simple one. So if you're looking for something to just get kind of maximum impact for small, is build your consistency. I feel like we have a lot of C words today, but building your consistency by delivering on a commitment. So one of the tricks for this too is to tell people, I'm making a commitment to you to get this done by then. I commit to do this by this time, and then actually doing it. So ending your meeting with a commitment section, like a lot of times we have action steps or next steps at the end of a meeting, maybe change that to commitments, right? And then have everybody go around at the end and say, I'm committing to this by this date. I'm committing to getting this done by here. And then at your next meeting, start with, last time I committed to this, I delivered on it, or I'm still waiting on it, but own it no matter what. And I think that's a really easy way if you want to build. Certainly if you run a team, you can put that into your team meetings. But if you're just an individual person, you can even just start to use that vocabulary. A lot of times it's not enough to just change behavior. We also have to kind of let people know by our vocabulary that we're decisive and strong in what we're committing to, and letting them kind of know that we're doing it.
I love that technique. I think it's very impactful, and it's not that difficult to do, but a lot of times we don't do it. We say something and we don't follow through, even if it's just an email and or a follow-up or sending somebody something, sending them what you said you were going to send them and you don't send it, then you're not following through. So it goes along with that key principle of, reliability is one of the ways I can build that trust. Somebody's going to rely on me because I'm going to deliver.
So what's another competence building technique?
The other one that comes up for me is my commitment to being authentic. I know that's like a buzzword, but, just my own self-awareness, I think, is huge in my leadership, and being authentic to that. Like we said before, showing vulnerabilities that I'm not doing everything perfectly, that I'm actually embracing the mistakes and the trip ups and the ball falling down as opportunities for learning. I love opportunities for learning. If we're creating psychologically safe places, then trust is being built, and I need to be able to look at failure, and challenges are absolutely one of the core elements of that. So
okay, so I'm going to challenge you here, because I think those things are super important, but I think those have way more to do with that kind of character section of the quotient more than the competency.
Interesting. Yeah. They do. And there's an overlap, but yes. Yeah. I can see that.
I don't know. I could see it both ways, but I don't know. For me anyway, I'm such a kind of discerner in terms of like going, okay, if it's an equation of competence and then there's an equation of character, like that authenticity piece seems so much a part of like who you are and how you live and like where your values are and how you show up. But I also understand that can become a competence too. So, I see.
I think in terms of relationship building, you may put it under the character bucket. That's fine. But I do think it can demonstrate competence in terms of how you show up. So Greg is showing up to the meeting with the client this way. Greg is showing up in his one-on-ones this way. Greg is showing up to, you know what I mean? Like how I'm showing up is then going to demonstrate to my colleagues, my direct reports, whoever I'm working with, my character and my competence, because I'm committing to bringing my best self to every room.
Right. And one would imagine that where that becomes a competence is because that authentic best self is something that gets results, that people pay attention to, that makes you more powerful in whatever you're providing, right?
Yeah, it even allows me to show off my expertise, which is very important as well, and be able to step into that with full confidence and demonstrate that as well in my authenticity. Right? Like, so it's like, it's because we all have different talents. We all have different attitudes, skills, knowledge, and styles, right? You're not going to be Greg Shamie. I'm not going to be Christine Courtney. However, what is the most you that you can bring into those spaces and really deliver. I love that. Deliver, 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 because that is absolutely key. And then if you're delivering on results and you're delivering on commitments, then your competencies are going to be definitely going up.
Yeah. And that leads me to, I think, another tip is to how do you increase your expertise? How do you increase your knowledge level? And for a lot of people, it's just experience and it's just time, right? Immediately when I have more competency in my job now because I'm past the 50-year mark than I did when I was 25. Like that's the reality. But there are things you can do in your career all along the way to gain some expertise or gain some knowledge. And certainly there is with the internet, right? With AI, there's ways to get certifications and new things. There's ways to keep up on new paths, but ask yourself all the time, am I learning things? Maybe it's that you need to have more expertise or more knowledge about your own company. Maybe you need to learn more about other areas. Maybe I need to take a free class somewhere to increase my expertise and increase your knowledge level. And if we're constantly working on that, we're increasing our competence and people are seeing that.
It's interesting because that came up in one of the self-assessments we do in our Building Trust workshop. It came up this week where a lot of people, their lowest in the self-assess, their lowest category was continual learning.
Really?
Yeah, which was really interesting in terms of competency because they, may have been hitting some kind of block where they've been there a long time and they needed to get the fire started again around their learning, right? Which is one of the reasons why we're a leadership development organization, is that we bring people together to fire up their learning and get them motivated and excited to strive for more so they're not getting complacent or staying in that comfort zone or, all those things. So I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, great. Another tip that I try to remind myself of is clarity. Like if I'm about to talk to people about something, can I try to get it down to 1 or 2 sentences? Can I make sure that I have enough? Can I double check with someone? Is this clear before I go? Can I find out afterwards? Can I make sure that I was clear? Can you say it back to me? Because people who are clear, who say what they mean what they say, all those things, those people, you will see they have a higher competency rating from people in their minds when you ask them, like, do you believe that person? Do you trust that person? A lot of times they'll be like, yes, they are always super clear with me on what I need to do. They're clear with me on where I fit in. If I need feedback, I'm clear that I'm going to get it from them. And when they give it to me, it's clear. That's a big one. Mm-hmm. What other areas? So maybe in those areas of, your character, like strengthening your character, what are things that people can do to kind of work on that? Because I think sometimes we think we're just kind of wired that way or we're not.
Yeah. I mean, you said it before, but knowing what I value and aligning with what I value and having that be intentional, I think is key, and connecting that to what is my organization value and how does it all come together? I think that's really important. But looking at things like, what are my strengths in character in terms of even just recognizing other people's contributions? How am I with, righting my wrongs if I make a mistake? Or how am I dealing with that? Do I have a defense system that goes up and wants to protect me from that? Or am I open and able to really navigate that effectively? Am I able to ask for help? That's another one I'm always thinking about in terms of character.
Okay, you are flying through these and there are a million gems and I want to make sure that my husband hears them. So let's go through right your wrongs, first of all, right? Admit mistakes. I think that's a huge one that you just said. So, I think that if you're looking for some way to build trust, writing that wrong there and starting with, I made a mistake here. I regret that I did this here is a really
easiest way.
Thing. Yeah.
Easiest way. I was wrong. I am sorry. Those little phrases. What? Like I think back to actually interactions in the workplace where a colleague dropped the ball and I was furious at them. Absolutely furious. Like, how could you do this? This is business, right? We're dropping the ball on something we needed to deliver, and you didn't deliver it when you said you were going to. Mm-hmm. And I expressed my frustration, and then there was an awkward silence, and then there was, I was wrong. I'm sorry. And I was just like, wow, talk about diffusing my emotional state. I was like, oh, well, he's owning it. He's absolutely owning it. Complete ownership.
Yeah.
Right. And I had nothing to grasp onto. It's an Aikido concept, a Japanese martial art where, that you're trying to grab the master and they're gone. right? And you're falling over because they're moving away and they're diffusing the attack. They're diffusing the attacking energy. And it's the same thing. It's so powerful.
Yeah, that is powerful. And the other side of that is how you forgive other people. Your character says a lot about you too, if you're able to be the one to forgive, especially after someone's owned it, right? It doesn't mean that you blindly trust them forever, but forgiveness is very powerful, and it's a big character trait that can help you at work, just like it can at home.
Well, here's a takeaway too, I think, from today, hopefully for somebody out there, is that, when we're talking about trust and the trust equation, the trust quotient, it isn't just the positive side, because trust is going to be broken. I think that's why I started telling those stories before, because it's actually essential that it gets broken.
Right.
In order to get back to what you were saying, for me to build my resilience, right, I have to be able to deal with broken trust. We could do a whole PhD on this, but it's so important to be able to work the whole equation, that it is, understand that it is going to get broken, and that it has the possibility to actually get stronger after it's been broken. That's something not a lot of people can compute.
Yeah.
But it does. Like, actually, when I think about a time where I was really betrayed by someone in work, actually, it happened different than I was just talking about. I was so angry, I couldn't do anything in that anger stage. But then once time passed and I was able to let go of those emotions, I was able to find some resolution with that individual. And then I was able to move forward. And now our relationship is 50 times stronger than it ever was before the breaking of the trust happened, before I was hurt.
That's right. And you're not at the water cooler, gossiping about that person. Like, it truly is like, that is a sign of character, right? Is how you are, behaving yourself, forgiving others. And it's for real. It's authentic.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that, Greg. Greg, we could talk about this topic forever. There's so many more things that one can do, but thank you guys for listening today. Thank you, Greg, for being here. And I appreciate the trust that we have when we facilitate together and when we work together. So thank you very much. Thanks for sharing of yourself today.
What a pleasure. What a pleasure. So many more things buzzing around in my head. I just love this topic. I know you can't tell.
We'll do it more later. Hopefully you guys got some things out there so you can work on your trust quotient in all parts of your life. So thank you so much. Have a good one. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I'd like to give a special shout out to our podcast producer, Richard Francisco. Check out our notes for any details. And if you get anything out of this, please follow us. And if you enjoy it, please take a moment to rate us or write a comment. It will mean the world to us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you just can't get enough, follow me on TikTok and check out tlpnyc.com/podcast for more information.